Hi, and welcome to another episode of Spinster Stories, where I spin yarn and tell spooky stories. Today, we are going to be going over the Honolulu Phrogging case. Absolute nightmare fuel. For those of you that are unaware of what phrogging is, it is when you live inside somebody's house without their knowledge. So when people do it a lot of the times, they'll sneak into your attic or your crawl space or weird gaps between your walls and just they live in your house with you and you have no idea they're there. Super, super creepy, super terrible. I would hate if this happened to me. I could not handle that. Before we get into all the details of the case, I'm going to show you what I'm spinning. We're still working on that black alpaca wool from Snowdrift alpaca fibers. Hopefully we'll have that done soon. And let's get into the details of this case. So we're going to be starting off in Hawaii, Honolulu, Hawaii. James and Brittany Campbell just moved into a new house, and it is September of 2019. So just moved in, loving life, and then they just start noticing things are just a little weird sometimes. So it started off with one day they went into the garage where a lot of the moving boxes were, and they had already been opened and some things were taken out, and neither of them remembered doing that. So it was just kind of weird, but at the same time, they could have forgot they opened it. So it wasn't too alarming. And then just little things would happen, like they'd hear noises or, you know, things would be missing from where they put it. So they'd set something down and then couldn't find it, and then it would show up in a completely different place in the house. Like for one example, they talked about was they had this blanket that they would watch movies with. And one night, James and Brittany went to go watch a movie, and they get into their living room, and they're on the couch, and they're looking for this blanket that they usually keep in this same place, and it is no longer there. And they look around for it; they can't find it anywhere. So they went on with their night and thought, oh, we must have misplaced it somewhere. Kind of weird that they would, because usually they keep it in the same place, but things happen, you misplace things. So they don't really think anything of it. And then a few days later, the blanket is on the couch, folded up, nice and neat. And they thought, oh, that's kind of weird. Neither of them remembered putting the blanket back or finding the blanket at all. So that was a little weird, but they don't think anything of it. And then one night, Brittany and James had gotten into bed. Brittany was already upstairs in bed, and James had come up, and she asked him, did you lock the doors? And he said, yeah, I locked the doors, because she thought she heard a door shut after James had come up. And so, she's a little spooked. Like, everybody gets paranoid. There's a burglar in their house if you hear weird noises at night. So you go check it out. So Brittany, James said that he had locked the doors, but Brittany had to go check for herself. And she goes to the front door, and it is unlocked. So James and Brittany have this huge fight about, the door getting locked and lying and all this. They didn't believe each other, and it caused a huge mess. So they move on with life. They keep, doing their thing. And then they went to go visit family in the mainland. So they took a plane. They were going to stay for a week. So they're gone, they're hanging out with their family, and decide to come home a day early. So they get on an earlier flight. And as they're pulling up to their house in their car, James's really nice road bike was sitting outside on the lawn, which is very unusual. James, takes good care of his things. And Brittany asked him, did you ride your bike recently and forget to put it back? And he said, no, I haven't touched my bike in a long time. So James gets out and starts to check things out because he thinks, oh no, maybe we have a burglar right now. So he gets out, looks in the garage, and it looks like a bomb went off. Like all the boxes are completely open, torn to shreds. All their stuff is everywhere. And so he kind of freaks out, grabs a sledgehammer, tells Brittany to call the police, and he goes to the front door. And as he's unlocking the front door, he tries to open it, and it's met with some resistance. He can't get it open. So he's pushing and pushing. And then all of a sudden, a face is looking at him through the crack in the door. And it's a whole person he doesn't know in there. And this man says, "You have the wrong house. This isn't your house." Just super calm, and just shuts the door back on him. And that freaks everybody out. What is going on? So they're waiting. Brittany's on the phone with the cop. She comes up and is yelling at him to let them in their house. They finally get the door open, and James drags this guy out of his house. And he is wearing James's clothes. So he's in their clothes, in their house, doing who knows what, freaking everybody out. Finally, the cops get there, and he doesn't put up a fight with the cops at all. He gets the handcuffs on, gets put in the car, and James and Brittany go inside the house to check it out. And same thing, the whole rest of the house. Everything is scattered everywhere. There's weird piles of stuff. He sorted through all their things. And then they go up. They had two boys. They go up to their boys' bedroom. And in that bedroom, it was a little different because he had just done all of their laundry, ironed their clothes, folded them, put them away, made their bed. It looked immaculate in there. So that's really, really unsettling, because they move on to their bedroom, where they look on their bed. The room's a mess. Everything is everywhere. Clothes everywhere, hangers on the floor. And then they look at the bed, and there's a towel laid out on the bed, and just an array of knives. Just knives all over this towel, laid out perfectly. It looked like a surgical table. And so they're freaking out, and, they're glad this guy is out of the house, but, they're confused. What in the heck is going on? And then they find a computer, an old computer that they stored up in the attic. And they get on it and start digging through it, and find this page of notes that he had been taking. And it was a whole page called The Omnivore Trials. And in these notes, detailed descriptions of every person in the family, notes on private conversations they had had, that there is no way he would have known it unless he was in their house listening to them. Which turns out that is exactly what was happening. He was living in their attic. And so they're freaked out. They keep going through these notes, and it's detailing plans that he had. He wanted to do surgical operations on them to transform them into rat-like people. And in the search history of this computer, there's, he's looking up videos on how to do arm amputations and gender reassignment surgeries. And he's looking up places to buy surgical tools and a surgical table, because he was completely planning out these weird, surgical science experiments he wanted to do on these people. And, while he's in jail, awaiting the charges, all this new evidence is coming out. And he had been released on, you know, supervised release, because they thought, yeah, he's a weirdo, but they didn't think he was going to do anything. And then as he's released is when all this new evidence they're finding. They're going through their computers. They're finding video vlogs. There's one on Brittany's computer that he filmed on her personal computer, filming himself using her makeup and doing a weird makeup tutorial. So creepy, so unsettling. I would absolutely hate it if somebody was, touching my things, especially makeup, because that's the bacteria and stuff from other people getting into that. That's disgusting. So with all this new evidence they're finding, it moves up his, they get him back into the jail on this burglary charge, because it clearly was more than burglary. And then while he is in the jail, 3 years after this incident, He killed his cellmate, 62-year-old Vance, and he absolutely beat him to death. He used his hands, just beat him to death, and ended up, he was stomping on his head to kill him. So he landed himself back in prison for 40 years for manslaughter. He took a plea deal. They were trying to get him life in prison without possibility of parole for first-degree murder, but he took the plea deal, and that brought it down to the 40 years for manslaughter. So with that all being said, I would love to know your thoughts on this, because I am absolutely disturbed. Just knowing somebody was in your house taking notes on you and your family and wanting to do surgical procedures on you, oh, it freaks me out. So, with all that being said, if you have any other spooky stories you would like me to cover, or if you have any stories of your own, feel free to send them in, and we will see you next time on Spinster Stories. Thanks for watching.